Okay, folks, we're ready to get started. Right before we get started, we've got our panel assembled. I do have a prize announcement to make. The survey prize for the Tuesday survey is now going to be given out. We still have Wednesday survey. The cutoff for Wednesday survey is going to be soon. We will give that prize out at the very end. So the Tuesday survey, here's what we're giving away. Spread Networks, once again, has given us a really cool prize. This is a DJI Phantom 3 Advanced drone. The 4K video and 12 megapixel still. I just looked up the data sheet. It's very cool. And the winner today is Sandy Murphy. Sandy Murphy, you are now the recipient of a DJI Phantom 3 Advanced drone from Spread Networks. And make sure you register it. I'm sure, yeah, just what you always wanted. You can go over, I'll get it for you in a second. Okay, the panel we have coming up next is an update on the IANA transition. This is from Alissa Cooper of Cisco. We also have on our panel Andrew Sullivan, John Curran, and John Sweeting. Alissa?
Thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm Alissa Cooper. I do work at Cisco, and I'm one of the area directors in the IETF Applications in Real-Time area. And we're here today to talk to you about the IANA stewardship transition. About 2 years ago at NANOG 61, we had an internet governance panel right after the transition had been kicked off. And we thought it was about time to catch people up on what's been going on. If you've never heard of the IANA stewardship transition, I will confess a small amount of envy. If you have heard of it, our distinguished panel here today will be providing their perspectives on what has gone on and what there is left to do. So in case you don't know them, we'll introduce our panel briefly. Right here we have John Sweeting, who's the Senior Director for Core Technologies at Time Warner Cable. He's currently serving on the NRO Number Council and was a member of the CRISP team that put together the numbers proposal for the transition. He spent 12 years on the AARON Advisory Council and 6 of those as its chair. To my left, we have John Curran, who's the president and CEO of AARON. He sits on the executive committee of the NRO, and the RRs use the NRO to coordinate on matters across the numbers registry system, including matters relating to contracting with ICANN. And then on the end, we have Andrew Sullivan, who's a fellow at DINE and is currently chair of the Internet Architecture Board. He joined DINE in 2012 and has been on the IAB since 2013. So, what is the IANA stewardship transition? As most of you know, ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, was formed in 1998 to maintain registries under contract with the US government, in particular with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, otherwise known as NTIA. And ICANN has a department that sits within it, which is IANA, which is the IANA that many of us interact with. NTIA's role has been twofold, really. They have something of a procedural role in the administration of the authoritative root zone file, but really their role has been largely symbolic. So they hold this contract with ICANN to perform the IANA functions, but they don't have a lot of day-to-day operational activity. In March of 2014, NTIA announced that they wanted to transition out of this role. They didn't want to have this contract anymore. They wanted the community to take over the stewardship of the IANA functions. And they asked ICANN to convene a process to develop a proposal for what this transition would look like. When this NTIA contract goes away, what should be in its place, if anything? And at the beginning, NTIA established a number of criteria that need to be met as part of the transition and a couple of expectations. So they said that the transition proposal, whatever it was going to be, would need to have broad community support, that the proposal would need to support and enhance this multi-stakeholder model that involves folks from industry, from the technical community, from government, from civil society, all together in supporting the IANA functions. The proposal needs to maintain the security, stability, and resiliency of the DNS. It needs to meet the expectations and needs of the IANA customers, including the RIRs and the IETF. It needs to maintain the openness of the internet, and it must not replace the NTIA's role with a government or intergovernmental organization. So those were the criteria that they set out right at the beginning back in 2014. And the current contract that they have with ICANN is set to expire on September 30th of this year. So it's been a long process, and we're definitely, I think, more towards the end than we are towards the beginning. The way that this proposal came about is that shortly after the announcement, a group called the IANA Stewardship Transition Coordination Group, or the ICG, was formed, and I'm the chair of that group. The group includes representatives from a bunch of different communities. There's people there who work in the domain name space, in the numbering space, in the protocol parameter space, and then there's folks from business, from government, from user communities. And in September of 2014, the ICG issued a request for proposals to what we have dubbed the operational communities. So one to the RIRs, one to the IETF, one to the domain names community, where we asked them essentially to write their own transition proposal, to respond to NTIA and say, for your slice of the IANA functions, what do you propose to do in light of this transition? And so the transition proposal that exists now is just the collation of those three proposals that we got, one from each community. So we're going to run through each of those components. Firstly, the names. So as I said, NTIA provides some oversight over functions related to the root zone of the DNS, really an administrative check and then a larger symbolic function. And that's, under the current contract, that oversight is maintained by contract. So NTIA has a backstop where it says, we've contracted with you, ICANN, to do these things. If you don't perform them properly, then we can move the contract elsewhere, we can ask you to make changes, and so on. So the big question of the transition is, when this contract goes away, what will replace it? And so the names community came up with a number of different new constructs and ideas for what their transition proposal should say. First, they proposed to transfer the IANA department to a subsidiary of ICANN. So a new subsidiary of ICANN would be created. In the proposal, it's called the Post-Transition IANA, PTI. So it's an acronym embedded in an acronym. And there would be some essentially legal separation between ICANN, the corporation, and PTI, which is a subsidiary of ICANN. And so instead of having NTIA contract with ICANN to perform the names functions, ICANN would contract with PTI to perform them. And the performance of those functions would be held accountable in a number of different ways. At the lowest level, by the direct customers of the names functions, essentially by the top-level domain managers. So they would monitor the performance of IANA, and they could bring complaints directly to PTI. Those managers would also be part of something called the Customer Standing Committee, the CSC, and they would be able to escalate complaints. If the PTI really was not performing the way it was supposed to, they could escalate complaints through the CSC. And then finally, the proposal establishes something called the IANA Functions Review, which would be a periodic review conducted to ensure that the performance was appropriate to the community's needs, and would also allow for some remediation, whether that's improving service level commitments or potentially, if things really aren't going well, initiating a separation process to move the functions to some other entity, if that was the choice of the names community. So that's, in a nutshell, what the names community is proposing. There's a kind of additional wrinkle with the names proposal, which is that to effectuate it, the names community said there's a number of things that we need to improve upon within ICANN's existing accountability structure. And these have been taken up by a separate group, which is called the CCWG on ICANN accountability, the cross-community working group on ICANN accountability. And if you look into the work that the CCWG has been doing, which has not concluded just yet, You see a number of items in their proposal that are directly a result of requirements that came from the domain names community in the transition proposal. So there's these two proposals now that are intertwined, essentially linked, because the names community said we need to make some improvements to ICANN's accountability in order to have our proposal really work. So some of those are straightforward, like that customer standing committee, the IANA functions review, the ability to separate in the event that that's the community's choice. All those things need to get written into ICANN's bylaws. So those are in the accountability proposal. There's some other things that the names community also asked for. They wanted to have the ICANN community oversight over the budget, including the budget for IANA. They wanted to have the community's ability to recall a board member or the entire ICANN board, another accountability mechanism within ICANN. They wanted the existing independent review panel that ICANN already has for other policy matters to be applicable to the IANA functions. And they really needed all of these to be incorporated into the ICANN bylaws in such a way that they couldn't easily be unwritten by the ICANN board, the so-called fundamental bylaws that have a higher threshold for being changed in the future. So there's dependencies between the names portion of the transition proposal and this work that's ongoing in the CCWG accountability. So that's the names proposal. And for the numbers proposal, I will turn over to John Sweeting.
Oh, I thought John Curran was getting this one. Okay.
Or Curran, whoever you choose among you.
Okay, so I was on the CRISP team that was, we were tasked to come up with a number proposal to provide to ICG to then be consolidated with the other two communities' proposals. Currently, this is the current overview here. It's the RIRs working with the IANA number system services, with NTIA overlooking the whole ICANN, who overlooks the IANA. Post-transition, what our proposal was asking for is that the NTIA step away, that we have a review committee that gets put together. Basically, that the real changes are just the review committee that does a review performance on the IANA functions, and there's also the service level agreement, which was probably the most contentious part of putting together the proposal, and I think that's still being worked on by the RIRs, and it's mostly being done by the legal teams from the RIRs. The NRO EC is overseeing that.
Anything to add, John?
I'll just add, the CRISP team was a team made up of community-appointed people from all 5 regions. They came up with a proposal that stated what the relationship between the RIRs and the IANA should be, that we should have a service level agreement and the outline of that service level agreement, and also that there should be a customer, not a customer review committee, but a review committee similarly composed. So there will be now, rather than ICANN doing its function for the RIRs and NTIA holding the contract, the RIRs will hold the contract with the ICANN for the IANA functions, but there'll be a review committee, again, made up of community members that meets and reviews performance annually. The service level agreement, the exact contract between the RIRs and ICANN, is actually 2 drafts have been published. We're up to the 3rd draft now. It's online on the NRO website. It follows the outline that the community built, the CRISP team outline, and it basically has what you'd expect in a service contract. We'll send in requests, you'll process them. If you don't process them correctly, there's an escalation process. And I encourage people to look at that. We're still getting legal feedback from ICANN on things they have comments on in that, but we're very close to the end. We're hoping actually to have that completed in the next few weeks, hopefully before the ICANN Marrakesh meeting.
Yeah, and a little color to that from the CRISP team. We actually, I believe, the individuals got appointed early November of 2014, and we had to have a community, each of the communities had to have their proposals done by like the 1st of December, and then the CRISP team got together as the whole team, which was 3 members from each of the RIRs, the RIR communities. 2 of those were from the community, 1 was from each of the RIRs themselves, the RIR staff. The service level agreement, we really kept to high-level principles that we then gave to the NRO EC to work with, to have the lawyers really put the SLA together along with ICANN. We realized that could not be done with going back and forth between the entire community and ICANN to get that, the SLA approved and accepted. So that's a little bit of the what happened behind the scenes on that. The CRISP team, we actually met almost every day through that holiday season to meet our deadline of January 15th to turn in our proposal to ICG.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, is that originally the NTIA contract was due to expire in 2015 and got extended a year. So the deadlines that the CRISP team and the IETF managed to meet were good on you for meeting those deadlines, but the names community has taken a little bit more time. So I think we did have one additional slide about the IPR. Did you guys want to talk about that at all?
One of the issues that comes up is that there's intellectual property involved. So there's the actual registries themselves, and there's the intellectual property surrounding the IANA domain name. And so the CRISP team proposal that the community came up and brought to the RIR leadership said this should be held in the public domain by a worthy party, a party that's going to handle it for the benefit of the whole internet. A lot of people, I guess, expected ICANN to be the one holding it, but since ICANN is sort of one of the involved parties, it was felt that we should have someone not involved, particularly, for example, if 10 years from now we had a transition to someone else maintaining these registries. The CRISP team proposal proposed that it be a third-party trust for this purpose or suitable, and actually noted that the IETF had a trust that could be the party that holds it. The IETF trust already holds other intellectual property like service marks and trade names related to the IETF. And so the RIRs took that from the CRISP team. We suggested strongly that that be the output. The IETF thought that that was acceptable, and the names community eventually decided that was acceptable. And now we're trying to actually work on that intellectual property transfer to make sure all of this is held by the IETF trust when we get to the transition.
Thanks. Andrew, do you want to talk about protocol parameters?
Sure, thank you. So as you can see, there's this current arrangement and a post arrangement on this diagram. And you can see that we've got sort of two, really only one difference, right? The NTIA sort of disappears from the right-hand side. So the good news that we were facing in the IETF is that we'd done a lot of this work in the past. And so we already had an agreement with ICANN for the IANA functions. We had the Memorandum of Understanding, and that's updated every year with supplemental agreements in order to keep things up to date and specify service level agreements and so on. And that's all already working. And so you can see on the left-hand diagram here, we have oversight of that. And then there was this additional oversight because ICANN had a separate contract with NTIA that in effect covered the same thing. And I know that you are all strongly in favor of storing the same data in two different places, coordinated by different people, because that always works so well in your network. And similarly, for this arrangement, we thought, well, that didn't work so well. So the simple answer is we just take away the one piece, and the other piece continues to function, and it functions as well as it ever has. And I should say, the IETF has been totally clear about this, that ICANN has been doing a fine job at delivering the IANA functions necessary for the IETF. Right? The IETF IANA functions are busy. There's a lot of them, but they're not something that is super hard. They're just critical. And so what we've seen is that ICANN is really good at this. They deliver this. We've got really, really good performance from them. They always deliver things very quickly, and we've been very happy with it. So there's no reason to change it, and we figured we'd just take this bit of contractual stuff away, take one group of lawyers out of the picture, and we have a functioning system. So that was our plan, and so that's what the post-transition arrangement is. And I think there's a big diagram of the right-hand side, but that's about all there is to it. And this is what we plan to do. We've been ready to do this essentially. We had an internet draft that had to be written down, and naturally we had to talk about where the commas went. But once we were done with deciding the precise locations of the commas in the text, it was all done, and it's sitting there ready to go. In order to implement this, there were a few little details that turned out to be necessary in the new proposal, and that meant that we had to update the regular annual language that we always update with IANA, and that's also ready to go. It's sitting there waiting to go. Because of the way it interacts with the existing contract between ICANN and the NTIA, it turns out that we can't do it, right? So this is an example of lawyers hindering the arrangement that we have. And I would have liked to have been a lawyer, but I'm not, and so I guess I can bash them. And so it's standing in the way, and that's the only thing that's standing in the way. And once the NTIA is ready to go, we'll be ready to finish this, and it will be all neat and tidy, and everything will be good. And also, I will never have to talk about IANA again. So that's pretty much all we've had to do here. I think we're ready to go. I'm happy that the entire arrangement seems to be proceeding towards a happy conclusion. It's a little bit later than I would like. I'd like to be done, but apart from that, I think it's good. Thanks.
I think we all share that same sense of this has been going on for a long time and we'd like for it to be done. So we've covered the three components of the combined transition proposal, and this just gives you the picture of what it looks like when we put them all together. So essentially, ICANN subcontracts all of the functions to this new entity, the affiliate, its own affiliate, the PTI. And the names, performance review and escalation functions that are established in their proposal all relate to the PTI. The RIRs have their SLA directly with ICANN and review performance via that mechanism. And the IETF as well maintains its MOU and annual updates with ICANN and uses that as the means to review performance. I think there's a close-up of this one as well, but it should be pretty clear that a lot of this looks quite similar to how things work now, right? So the RIRs have added on an additional contractual mechanism. IETF isn't really changing much of anything. The IANA department, as it stands, in terms of the staff and the operational contingencies, are all expected to not have much change at all. So it's really kind of a minimal change proposal, other than establishing this legal separation such that the names community could have their ability to execute their oversight. And that's the blow up. So in terms of what's left, there's really two tracks of work that are ongoing, the proposal and its implementation. So on the proposal side, as I said, there's still work ongoing in this cross-community working group focused on ICANN accountability. And it is looking like their proposal will be finalized in the coming weeks. It's not for certain, but it's looking closer to done. And so until that happens, the folks who worked on the transition proposal and the proposal itself are kind of just sitting in the drawer. The ICG is waiting until this other work concludes to ship the proposal off to NTIA. And in the meantime, on the implementation side, there has been some administrative preparation, in particular on ICANN's side, to get ready to make all these changes happen before the NTIA contract expires. So they've been looking at what they would have to do to set up the PTI and changes to the root zone maintenance function and a variety of different tasks that they will need to do once the proposal is approved in order to get it implemented. They're basically trying to do as much as they possibly can, but they can't do too much because no one wants it to look as though the approval by the US government is a foregone conclusion. And so that's really the next step. So once these proposals go to NTIA, hopefully within a matter of weeks, the US government will enter a period where it's reviewing the proposal, both among the federal agencies and the US Congress. And in the end, the NTIA has to feel comfortable that the proposal meets all of those criteria that it set out at the beginning, and that it's ready to have that contract expire. And then once it gives the okay, full steam ahead on the implementation, getting the PTI set up, getting the contracts signed and executed, the SLAs, all of those steps hopefully will only take a very short number of months in order to get it all done before the contract expires. So that's what's left in terms of the process. So we would be more than delighted to take anybody's questions, so feel free to come up to the mics. I do have one question that I wanted to start with for the panel as people gather, and that is, why should anybody care about this? Why does the transition matter? And why does it matter to get the proposal approved by the US government in the end? Go ahead.
I'll take that on. So at a high level, this isn't very important and is very important. It isn't very important because the system functions now today and it works fine. The IANA handles the protocol parameters for the IETF. For the RIRs, we make a total of half a dozen requests a year. When an RIR needs a new big AS block or V6 block, there's not many requests between the RIRs and the IANA, and handles the numerous updates to the name community, and it works. And it works because the US government, through NTIA, has been the contracting party, nominally, for all of this for decades. And you can say, if it works, why change it? We don't know if it would always work as peacefully. We don't know if the US government would let us basically tend to business forever, for decades to come. It is kind of interesting that all the identifiers that make the internet run are nominally done because the US government has a contract with ICANN to handle this central registries. So from that perspective, we don't really have to change anything, but if it's a global internet, it might be good if instead each of the set of identifiers, the names, the protocols, and the numbers, were being done by ICANN, the same party, still doing the same work, but being done because each of the affected communities asked ICANN to do it on their behalf. That's the transition that we're doing. It shouldn't change much. It's not changing the job. It's just changing who's asking ICANN to do the job.
So I agree with all of that, but there is another thing here, and that is that the way that the internet has been successful and has grown has mostly been because of people consenting to things, right? You interoperate with people, you exchange packets with people you peer, you accept the root zone that is the IANA root zone, you use IETF protocols because they work for you. And there is this picture that some people have that the way the internet works is because the US government says so. And we all know, because we're all operators, we all know that actually that isn't true. If you don't like the way something works on the internet, don't do that. And that's a practical fact of the way the internet works. But people who maybe, there was a nice comment yesterday in the panel with Dave Clark where he said, there are these opportunities for government people who don't really understand the way the thing works to misunderstand something. And this is an example of something that is a tremendous opportunity for misunderstanding. The idea is that because there's some government backing up this IANA contract, that's the reason that it works. Whereas, of course, the reason that it works is because everybody's using it. And people could just stop using it tomorrow, and that would also be the internet. It would just be a really different internet. And so I think that what this is really is an opportunity for the internet to show that it's grown up actually working according to the principles that it was founded on, of voluntary interoperation among these various kinds of networks. And the IANA function has sort of hung around as this vestigial reminder of the foundation of the early project in the Department of Defense, but it hasn't really been the NTIA that has been imposing those things all along. The NTIA, to its credit, I think they all understand this perfectly well, but I'm not sure everybody else does. And I think that taking this out gives us, an opportunity to get a burr out from under the saddle and to make perfectly clear that the internet works because people are using the internet, and that fundamental piece of making things work together is the way that you identify whether the system is working, not contracts.
Yeah. So I totally agree with everything Andrew has said, and I think it's very, very important that it happens at this time, because we don't know when we'll get another chance to get this done. And I think it's time that it happens, and I think we should really push hard to get it done this time. So.
Yeah, and the consequences of having had a chance and not
we
being
can't
able
fail.
to execute. Yeah, I mean, it's not. I think there is a perception among some people that you could just, continue the process next year or restart exactly where you started to begin with, and that really doesn't seem to be.
I don't think it's going to be that easy.
Yeah. Okay, let's turn it over to the floor, Mr. Bush.
Randy Bush, IAJ. Just in case you wonder, John, it doesn't always work. It took me over a year to add a quad A record to a name server. And the problem wasn't in Marina del Rey, it was on the other side of the country. The US government control of the internet has got to change. I think you guys should work on, and girls, pardon me, should work on getting the IANA the heck out of the United States. But I have one question on slide 8, please. I should have said slide 8 first so you could backspace while oh, no, you're quick. Okay, so there's a service level agreement and you review performance, and then there's advice. So you're going to give advice to the organization, which is notorious for ignoring advice. ICANN. Stonewalling, pretending it doesn't happen, throwing lawyers at it. Is there any hope you can fix that?
So let me respond. The Christine proposal said, RIRs, you should contract with ICANN to do the same thing it's been doing, administer the number of registries. And you should have a service level agreement with ICANN. And when that service level agreement comes up, you should review ICANN. The RIR should review ICANN and see how they're doing. But we, the user community, the RIR people, the folks in the numbers community who participate in the CRISP team, said they want a review committee, so it won't just be the RIR executives and staff reviewing ICANN's performance. We will have people from each of the regions, just like we do policy, on a review committee. But that is ultimately a contract that the RIRs have with ICANN, and if we don't like performance, we can leave and end that contract. That contract's a 5-year contract, which allows exit for performance or exit with 6 months notice of non-renewal. So the advice is voice of the user to the RIRs. It's not advice to ICANN. The contract is held by the RIRs collectively with ICANN, and it's renewed because ICANN does a good job.
Is the same? Is it analogously?
I'm sorry.
Is it analogous in the DNS space and the IETF space?
I would let the IETF.
That was a binary question.
I would let the IETF speak to theirs. Regarding the namespace, I guess, the names community didn't define itself distinct from ICANN. It actually, rather than pulling itself out of ICANN and said, we're contracting with ICANN, it said, ICANN represents us, and we want to pull the IANA out of ICANN, and this is how we ended up with the post-transition IANA. So it's a little more complicated on the name side. That's also why the names community listed a list of powers that showed up that they needed on ICANN's governance. because they see ICANN, these accountability powers, they see ICANN as their representative structure contracting for IANA services. Yes.
Alissa, can we bet on this?
Bet on it? We could have like a plenary size bet. We should.
You know what I'm
The
asking.
names community proposal is
Not
interesting,
John.
rich and chewy.
Not you, John. I don't need more words. I need a binary answer. Is this a path that we, the operational community, should feel comfortable with?
Absolutely, in terms of what's specified in the proposal. Yeah, this proposal I think is pretty rock solid.
Thank
like
you.
I said, yeah. Whether it gets, I thought you were betting on whether it
I
gets
understand.
done. I'm not
I've
going to
met-
bet on whether it gets done.
I've met the Army in Marina Del Rey.
Go ahead.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire, NAC. So I've seen a number of these slides over the course of the last couple of years, and it feels like a sugar high, low sort of situation. And right now, we've gone from the sugar low 6-12 months ago to probably closer to the sugar high of getting this done or having something that people feel comfortable with. In an elevator pitch, what's still wrong, or what is where are you concerned? I think that's the hardest thing from my perspective, is saying everybody knows this is a good thing, or everybody thinks this is a good thing. There's hundreds of pages of things to go through. I would never want to be on one of the mailing lists that you're all on. How can we explain to the community just a point in time right now, this is where we feel that there's a problem, or this is where we feel that will be successful? I guess similar to what Randy was saying, the binary. I'm asking for a little more nuance of the binary, which is, where do you consider the problems to be?
Well, so this sort of depends on how far out you want to go. The basic thing here is that the current problem is that we've got this contractual relationship in one country that makes a lot of people nervous. And those of us who have real operational clue say, but that contract is not the thing that's holding it together, so get rid of it. And so that's the fundamental thing. Just like we do in every other thing. You know, if you go and explain to legal people the way most peering agreements work, they don't believe you either. But the fact is, that's how the internet is working. And my view is that is what makes the internet as resilient as it is, because what we can do under those circumstances is, rather than having it all bound up in law and treaties, we have it bound up in operational reality. And this is one more step towards that. So the high level piece of why is this important, why should you care about it, is if you think the internet functions better when people who have real stake in the game of making it work are the ones who make it work, then this is a way to do that. And that's the reason to do it. Now, if what you're asking is, could this go pear-shaped in various ways? Well, sure, right? There's still a lot of details to work out. There are, you know, implementation pieces that have to happen, and we all know that when you're, you know, actually deploying your plan in any network, you know, things can go wrong too. But, you know, there are things that can go wrong, and what you do is respond to those things. And if you've got a solid plan, you can react and you can do it. We do have the unfortunate problem that we have a deadline corresponding to a contract expiry with the US government in a US election year. And since I currently live in New Hampshire, I may be a little bit more sensitive to those kinds of problems than some. But that's just you know, a reality, and we've all coped with those kinds of problems you know, when deploying anything or making anything happen. And so I feel like we're in a position to make this work, and what we really need to do is get behind it. And when somebody comes along and says, oh, but, you know, the answer is, yeah, but the internet's working, so would you please get out of the way and let us get on with the job? And I think that's the key thing that we have to do. Let the people who are actually making the internet work make it work the way it has worked all along.
So you always want to have a problem statement before you solve a problem. If we have to create a problem statement, it's very hard because ICANN's actually done a pretty good job of managing all of this, and NTIA has done a very good job of telling ICANN, manage this, and then not doing anything. NTIA has not, even though it's nominally the contractor, has not meaningfully interfered with the operation of any of this. It's basically had a string and said, do this because we're telling you. It's never had to use that mechanism. So you could say it works very well, and it should continue for centuries this way. It would be fine. However, the absence of a problem doesn't mean the risk of a problem does not exist. We do not know whether or not at some point the US government might do something different in how it's administering the current arrangement. It might decide that there's a national imperative for it to do something in its oversight of these registries. That hasn't happened, so we haven't seen what the fallout of that would be, but I'm willing to guess it would be suboptimal in oh so many ways. One way to prevent that is to have the communities affected by each of these, the names, the numbers, and the protocols, be the party asking for them to be administered. Is that a better mechanism? We're talking about protective mechanisms. We currently have the US government and NTIA as a protective mechanism. Do you want a different protective mechanism? Trying to judge the effectiveness when you've never actually pulled the pin and fired either fire extinguisher is very difficult. But that's the concept here, is that we do have a concern that one government has a unique role and that we can't predict that that would work for longevity of decades or centuries.
Thank you.
I just one kind of to build a little bit on something that Andrew said. I do think that at this point in the process, the sort of the U.S. political process is probably the largest risk, right? So to the extent that people look at this and they believe that, oh yeah, this is just business as usual, looks like things will continue to work, they've been working well, not really concerned about the idea that the details are changing too much, because they aren't. It's really important to send that message every place that you can, right? To say, I support this, this is good, it should be approved. And that might seem completely obvious, or it might seem like, oh, like, what can I do to change things? But to the extent that this ever comes up in any conversation that you have, and you think this thing is good and should go, please tell the person that you're talking to that this thing is good and it should go. Because that is going to be a controversial message as the US political process goes forward. And in particular, like the one aspect that seems to be the lightning rod is relates to one of those NTIA criteria, which is, can this, people think that people in the political process think that the community is sort of a synonym for foreign governments are going to take this over, right? And if you know anything about the way that the RIRs work or the IATF works, and ICANN is, this set of improvements is very much in that same vein, think about how hard it would be for the IATF to get captured by one foreign government, or for the NRO to get captured by a foreign government, captured to the extent that it's actually being controlled by a single government, or any government, forget about foreign, not foreign, right? It's pretty hard to imagine any conceivable way that could happen, because the way that we work is very open and transparent, and whoever people make decisions in a distributed fashion. There's all these different reasons why. And so that is kind of a bedrock of this proposal, that it has a multiplicity of ways in which it prevents capture by any single interest. And to the extent that that is the thing that is worrisome from a political perspective, you guys know that that's not really a risk here. And so that's another good reason to support this proposal going forward, I think. Yeah.
There is one thing that I will mention following up on that, and something that Randy asked earlier. One of the things about ICANN as compared to some of the other organizations is that I think many of us in this room who are maybe more on the operational side of things, we have a little maybe bit of discomfort in the more commercially driven and contractually driven environment that some of ICANN works by. But it's still a legitimate and vibrant community of people who want things to work well and want it to work just because it works. And most of the proposals for the accountability in ICANN, I have to say, the ones that are really critical, are there to make sure that that has to continue to be true. So the big accountability changes, for instance, allow the ICANN community to remove board members or remove the entire board. So the board no longer has the ability just to force something to happen. There's a number of pieces there that are there to make sure that no one community can force things on everybody else. So it requires a sort of mechanism to prevent those kinds of things. And it allows the community to look pretty hard at budgetary decisions that the board makes, and also to prevent the board from unilaterally making changes to the bylaws that actually provide for all of this. So it really is designed to ensure the kind of accountability that I think, you know, in other parts of the internet community, we're more comfortable with slightly more informal mechanisms of doing that instead of corporate bylaws. But you know, each of us does it in various ways. The RIRs still have corporate bylaws, but of course have these community processes. And I think what ICANN is doing is embracing that a little bit more tightly and sort of trying to internalize this idea that the community really needs to engage with these decisions. So I think that that's only a good thing. It's healthy for the internet.
It puts the accountability where it should be.
Absolutely.
They're going to be, ICANN now has to be accountable to the internet community, not to NTIA. Even though it has been working, like you said, that could change in a blink of an eye.
Randy?
Randy Bush, IJ. Excuse me if I shout, but I've been told I'm mumbling. I like what you said, Andrew, and if there are a lot of people in this room that would do something if you need it. When you're finished with this ICANN monster, could you focus on Aaron?
Actually, can I respond to that?
Of course.
So Randy brings up a great point, and I'm going to highlight this. So NTIA has been out there. If the RIRs were to go off the rail, you'd had NTIA that you could pick up the phone and call. This changes that. The IETF, in theory, I don't know how you'd know if the IETF were rogue or what the signs of that would be.
There are rails?
It might be rogue
We heard
right
Alyssa's-
now. I mean, how would you know?
So,
We heard her speech. It's off the rails.
right. So the point is, though, that it's very important that this does change the mechanisms that you have, the people you have to go to. And so I don't think a lot of people have gone to NTIA and said, I have a problem with the RIRs, I have a problem with Aaron. I don't think a lot of people have gone and said, I have a problem with the IETF or a problem with ICANN, but it has happened. And so one of the things that's very important to think about here is that we're giving this to the community. These structures, the IETF, the RIRs, and ICANN, you actually have to get involved in. I'm really sorry, because any one of these organizations can become self-captured if you don't get actively involved and stay involved. And the possibility of that happening goes up when you've taken the government out of the equation. Randy said it well. You need to be vigilant about the organizations, because there is nothing above them post-transition.
You're speaking as the CEO of an organization where the governance committee is composed of members of the board, where the membership is the quote membership, bottom up, blah, blah, when last reported was 17% of the address holders, right? And some of us have tried to affect this. But I don't think we need to go down the Aaron path. I think most of us have the pain. But I think the lessons learned in dealing with ICANN, I think this community should look at this stuff and say, how can we carry it elsewhere, right? We have semi-functional culture. We hang on because packets really want to get to their destinations. But as a culture, as an administrative culture, we're not as healthy as we could be.
So that I think that actually opens to a good question, which is what lessons have we learned in this transition process? You knew I was going to ask you this ahead of time, so but you know, it's been almost 2 years, the process so far. Do you think there's anything to carry forward? I mean, not necessarily specific to the details of the substance of it, but in terms of what has gone on, any lessons to carry forward?
So the first lesson that I have learned personally is don't volunteer for things. More seriously, a really big lesson that I learned from this is that, you know, the IETF did a lot of work on these things early on in the changes as ICANN was being developed and so on, and when the IANA was changing, way back in the 90s and early 2000s, and that was because the IETF had this, you know, thing that was there, and everybody thought it was boring but important. You know, that's the real story about IANA, right? It's like a land registry or other kinds of things like that. It's really important that it be good and clean and tidy and reliable, but it's not very interesting because, like, it shouldn't be. And if it's interesting, you've done it wrong. And so the IETF did a whole lot of work and did it over time. And that meant that when we had to write the IANA plan document and get that out the door and come to agreement and so on, it was easy. It was one of the only administrative, you know, kinds of discussions in the IETF that didn't go on for years and leave people scarred and angry with one another, right? Everything else, all the BCPs and so on at the IETF, they're always nasty discussions. And yet the IANA discussion was incredibly nice and friendly and short. And I thought, wow, this is the sign that, you know, you've done the work. And I have, for my previous commissions of various activities, I guess, I have also participated fairly heavily in the ICANN work on this and spent a lot of time on that. And it was really hard work. And it was really hard work because they hadn't done any of this. They'd spent a lot of time on other pieces of their concern. There were a lot of controversial decisions that were taken there about, you know, how to expand the route and whether to, you know, expand it in various ways. I'm sure you all know about the various labels that people felt strongly about. So because those were the important issues for that community, when this came along, it was just an enormous amount of work. And some of my colleagues there have said on occasions, they've said, you know, oh, well, you guys had it easy. No, we didn't have it easy. We did the work over 15 years. Right. It's the same amount of work, but we did it over 15 years. And if you do a little bit of unpleasant work every day, you know, then pretty soon, you know, it's easy. Whereas if you have to do it all in one big go, it's really hard. And I think that that's one of the things that you know, I mean, I knew this anyway, right? This is how you administer your systems, right? You do little things all the time, and that way stuff doesn't get out of control. Whereas if you just leave your wiring closet and keep adding stuff in there, pretty soon you've got a real mess and you've got to do it. And the same thing is true, it turns out, about administrative things, which are even less interesting to do than rewiring your closet. So it seems to me that this is one of those lessons that, you know, your mother told you when you were 4, and yet, you know, you didn't really internalize it, and here it turns out to be useful when you're an adult. That to me was something that really came home in this whole thing.
John?
I don't know if you'd call it a lesson learned, but definitely a lesson reinforced, and that's that the global internet community is very powerful and can actually get a problem thrown at them, get a very short, at least in a couple of the communities, get a problem thrown at them, gather the information in their respective regions, get the consensus around that, then go into a little larger forum with all the other communities, And then after, from the numbers community, then we went into, you know, the 3 different communities to boil that down, and it just amazing that amount of people and area that they could all end up like agreeing that, yeah, this is the way to go. And I think that's what we're built on, and that's why it's important that we seize this moment and move forward with it and get it done this year.
I might not be as jolly as my prior 2 panelists. So recognize, by the way, this wasn't a lot of work, because the RIR, as an executive of the RIR, we actually stood back. We had a CRISP team, which John sat on, and we let them build the proposal that we went to the ICG. We let them do the outline of the service level agreement. They set the terms. We are busy negotiating with ICANN, trying to make a contract that matches that. But in general, this was something that we let the community say, what do you want? Do you want a contract or not? A long contract or short contract? Do you want a review committee or don't you? Folks, it's a war of attrition, and I'm going to try to tie back into what Randy said earlier. The views that got represented were the people who realized that if they spoke and stayed with it and attended the calls and got involved and stayed involved, even though this is not particularly exciting work, it's kind of like eating your veggies. You want the creme brulee and the steak, you don't want the vegetables. This stuff is boring, and it's a lot of work. The number of calls that the CRISP team had at one point going through Thanksgiving and Christmas was a call every 48 hours so that the proposals could be finalized by January 15th. It's an enormous amount of work. Okay. You have to get involved. You don't necessarily have to get involved in this, but you need to get involved in these governance and administrative functions. You need to get involved in these projects. You need to be active, because the voices that get heard are the ones that are willing to win the war of attrition. And by the way, after they've spent 5 years doing this, they may not be a network operator anymore. So they may have no idea what you guys do for a living. So you have to get involved, okay? We have a successful output, I think. It's workable. There were enough fresh eyes on it. There were enough knowledgeable people. But this tends to be done in the back corner, and it doesn't attract people who necessarily have an able on a router, okay? And so it may not seem exciting, but please, when you see something like this, even if it's, you know, once every 2 years, throw yourself at one of these committees, one of these governance functions, get involved, because we'll lose clue density otherwise.
It's interesting, John, that I think, just to paraphrase what you just said, it sucks, but you should participate in it.
Right.
And what I was thinking, which is not really a lesson, I guess you could frame it as a lesson, but I've thought many times during the process, which is, if you look at the amount of time and energy that really smart people from the internet community have spent on this, really smart people whose skills and interests and desires all lay entirely elsewhere, like engineering and making things work and making the internet work better. It's obscene how much time and energy was spent by those people. How can we make that not ever happen again?
Right.
How can we eliminate this kind of cruft such that we can all get back to doing the things that we like to do, that we are good at doing, that, you know, our shared project of making the internet work better. And, you know, this sort of counts on the outskirts as making the internet work better, but I would love to try and think of a way that we could never end up in a situation like this again, where we all have to spend this much time. That's like ideal, right? There will always be some of these kind of administrative processes that we have to go to, but to me, that's the main lesson. Like, don't end up in this situation again. And part of that has to do with being beholden to, you know, one arbitrary actor's decision, you know, to have a contract or not have a contract or whatever. And so the more that we can eliminate those kind of vestiges, I think the better off we will be. But I think we are almost right out of time. So please join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you.
Good discussion.
Okay, folks, we're going to shift gears and move into lightning talks. Our panel is free to go. And by the way, I do want to say the award for best footwear goes to Andrew Sullivan. So we're going to have our first lightning talk. Come on up. Carl, where are you, Carl? You do not get a drone. You get to give a lightning talk. Carl Brumand. He's going to be talking about, does peering make Anycast better? There he is.
Oh, good, green button. Hi, I'm Carl, back up here again. Network engineer over at Dyn. You know us, DNS people, internet measurement, performance stuff. Okay, enough about that. So one of the things I thought would be kind of interesting, since we do DNS, we do measurements, or do Anycast measurements, we should take a look at that. So, Anycast, obviously the idea is you got nodes everywhere, and there's, a whole bunch around the world, and they're supposed to be, like really close to everybody. That's the whole idea of doing them. And, well, there's the whole thing of how are they connected? Do you just buy transit in all the sites? Is there peering involved? Or are they basically just dropped in, ISPs where it'll be obviously a mix thereof? So I thought, let's kind of, take a look at some of that stuff, do some measurements. So we kind of generally accept that, Anycast is good, and a whole lot of Anycast, that must be really good, because, it's more is better. And peering is always considered to be a good thing, so, So the kind of questions I was asking was, do more nodes make better connectivity? And, basically, is peering better than just having transit by itself? So basically, all I'm measuring here is network latency. I'm not doing a Jeff Houston thing. It's just basically trace routes, how long does it take to get there? I needed some Anycast, so I thought, hey, root servers, that works. Some of them have only a few, some have a lot. That works. But I needed something that was only transit, so disclaimer, did not use Dyn's own DNS service. Instead, I picked one of our competitors, and I picked something else that also has some peering, for contrast. This is a lightning talk. Anyway, yes, eye chart here. Basically, the idea is we want to see a lot of green here. So, but this is the A route. There's only about 5 nodes, so we kind of expect that we're not necessarily going to see that much green. There's going to be a bunch of places where it's, it's just further away. And that kind of makes sense because, if you only got 5 nodes, it's kind of hard to cover the world. So what about a root server that has, a few more? So take, for example, the F root node, somewhere around 60 nodes. And, well, it looks a little bit better, but I'm still kind of seeing still a fair amount of yellow and red here. So obviously it's, 60 nodes isn't quite, it seems, enough to sort of cover everything. Well, what if I had something that was like, even more nodes? So I figured, let's take a look at the L root node. About 150 of those, that should be plenty, right? I mean, with 150, you really have to have, pretty much everybody covered. And, well, now we've got really interesting things because, I take a look at Denver. Denver has a L root node, which, may or may not be up, but let's assume it's up. Being if it's not, I mean, San Francisco and LA aren't really that far away. But Denver is actually really crappy. Why is Denver crappy? Well, it's kind of crappy because it's going all the way over to England. So it's completely avoiding everything in the US. And there's other ones I kind of looked at in this. Japan really likes to go to either Sydney, Australia, or to Washington, D.C. One thing I should say is each of these dots represents a measurement point. So it's basically going and taking a look and seeing, how far is it from each of these points to a various L root node, then draws the appropriate color for that dot. And kind of went like, well, how is this possible? So I threw a little visual, because it's just too hard to put the text output of a trace route. And again, we can kind of see the whole, Denver running across the ocean. Like I say, you've got other stuff. So one of the interesting things we've got here is that when you connect to various networks, those networks may decide to carry you quite a long ways because, well, it's peering. And of course, I would want to carry it across peering. I want to carry it across my own network instead of just dropping it off to transit. It's not geographically closer, it's economically closer. So this is kind of one of the interesting things here is that even with 150 nodes, you may or may not get great performance. So I kind of look at this and kind of go like peering, meh. So I thought, well, let's take a look at something that doesn't involve peering. So take a look at this one. This IP's in it's an Anycast DNS service. It's not us, it's one of our competitors. They've got about 20 nodes, and they're actually not doing too bad. For 20 nodes, there's actually a whole lot of green, and it's actually not really that bad. So it's kind of, oh, clearly the answer is, just use transit. Of course, transit costs money, and so on. But it's somewhat interesting that having a lot of nodes and having a lot of peering doesn't necessarily equal having a better experience for end customers. And I thought, I really should kind of contrast that with something else. So, who else but Google? And of course, Google uses a combination of peering and transit. And they actually seem to be doing a really good job of it. So they're clearly doing a lot of traffic engineering on this to manage things. As an aside, we had some of our services, we were dropping in remote nodes, and we had some interesting things about half the world decided that Toronto, Canada was really the best place to go. Singapore, no, don't go locally, let's go back to Toronto. And a lot of that was because of one of the ISPs we were in decided that peering with certain global ISPs is a good thing, and of course the global ISPs will just like to carry it across their backbone regardless of halfway around the world or halfway across the city. So in this particular case, it's kind of shows peering can not necessarily be a bad thing. So again, what this is taking from this, and yes, this is a lightning talk. I'm doing this in like 5 minutes. This is not in-depth, deep analysis. So yes, you can poke lots of holes in this. But what I'm saying here is that just having a lot of nodes isn't necessarily better. As we kind of saw with the L route, it wasn't actually necessarily that much better than some of the other ones that had a lot less nodes. Peering, can be kind of okay. Sometimes it works out really well. But basically, as we also discovered, you have to do a whole lot of traffic engineering whack-a-mole. I wanted to use those examples. Unfortunately, we all cleaned them up, so they no longer suck, which is good for us and then makes a bad presentation then. Peering can also be really good. You just have to kind of put the time and effort into kind of playing the whack-a-mole game and going through and keep measuring, kind of seeing where traffic is and figuring out the right communities and so on. It's a very much a mileage may vary. This is something that's kind of, like I said, was sort of thrown together. Certainly it's something that we could do a much longer talk on if there would be any interest in the community on this. So that's about all I have. Thank you.
One question.
Oh, switch. Does it work? Okay, good. Dimitri Kohanik in Turks. Have you actually used any results in Dyne Zone network?
We have done this. I didn't want to display our own, partially because some of these probes are co-located with our own servers, and it's kind of pointless to sort of show that it's really half a millisecond across a router. So that's why I used one of our competitors, which was also a transit only.
Right, and I think you may make it a longer talk.
Pardon?
I think the longer talk would be useful.
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you.
Randy Bush. Hi,
Hi,
Jay.
Randy.
There were two reasons for massive Anycast. One was a better customer experience, but possibly the most important one was resilience to attack. And when we see the 38 mess, et cetera, I really think you should consider not putting nodes so near the next tranche of nodes, not near your customers and eyeballs, but near the sources of the attacks to soak them up where they start.
Good point.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Danilo asking the question, where are the Anycasters? Let's kind of see a theme emerging here.
Hi, everyone. On the last year, I've been studying Anycast, and we've done a study about Anycast. Here, I'm presenting you where are the Anycasters. And I am a PhD student from Telecom Paritech. And this is a work that I have done with my supervisor, Dario Rossi, and also the other people as Diana Jumblat and Jordan Auge. So, first of all, today, I will introduce you our technique that we use for geolocate the Anycast instances. And the second point, it will be our results of our IPv4 Anycast censuses. And there will be some screenshots of our demo software that are online and you can use. And finally, our ongoing work on an application of this work to a BGP hijack detection that for the moment we have won the hackathon from Kaiden. So, before starting my PhD, I was looking some NANOG video. There was a presentation on who are the Anycasters. And actually, so after some years, finally we came up with where they are. And this is our demo that is available online, and also all the results you can browse there. So, when I started, I was checking online as like which services could geolocate Anycast. And there were some commercial database, and these are the answers. We were getting some poor answers like United States. Others were getting really precise information as like latitude and longitude, but where we tried to geolocate on a map, this was the results. After we found also some distributed measurement platform, but the result was always the same. We were getting always one answer, not a list of location. So basically, what we need is just few latency measurement. Over this one, we want to just exploit some speed of light violation. And so the measurement platform, some distributed measurement platform can do this. So how does it work? We use different platforms as like REP Atlas, Planetal, but we can use also other. We leverage some latency measurement. We convert this latency in a radius of a disk, and we try to detect some speed of light violation. The next step is try to enumerate the maximum number of circles that don't intersect each other. That is an NP-hard problem, but there is a greedy algorithm that works quite well. The output of this phase is a set of circles that don't intersect each other. And inside each disk, we try to geolocate where is the Anycast distance. And finally, we found that the most populated city is the best choice. What we do after is to shrink the radius of the latency measurement around the city that we picked, and we iterate the process. So we are able to increase the number of Anycast instances found. So basically, this is an example. It was one target, and we just leveraged from several vantage points our measurement. And what you can see is that just the 10% of disk had a radius that was smaller than 1,000 kilometers. So the performance of the software are quite good, as like we are able to enumerate and geolocate over the 75% of the Anycast instances. We are protocol agnostic. We can use for whatever target. And we use 100 times less probes than the previous work, and we are quite fast. In a few milliseconds, we can give you the answer. Next step was the census. We had really to do a lot of work to engineering everything and let it work. So we were starting from 10,000 live targets, for one target for each /24, and we were probing them from 100 vantage points using ICMP packets. What we were doing was probing them with 1,000 packets per second, and we tried to slow down our tool just because we tried to decrease the number of packet loss that we were getting, and we were able to complete one census in a few hours. After this, we ran our algorithm that in the previous version needed 100 milliseconds, that for a census it means 1 week. So we engineered everything, and then we came up with a software that is able to analyze the whole census in 3 hours. And as output, finally, we have 1,000 Anycast subnet prefix. Who are they? Yeah, here is the list. What we found was Tier 1 and some ISP, other CDN that were hosting really popular web content, and we scan also all the TCP ports. So we were finding that they are serving some different services, and moreover, there were different deployments. Some of them they're using a lot of /24, some of them just one. Next step, BGP hijack detection. We are thinking to apply this technique to find speed of light violation for some for some BGP hijack attack. And we won't follow two different views. The first one is a reactive tool that is able to analyze the BGP feed from some platform as BGP Stream and Isolario that have been presented here, and after run some measurement on the data plane. This introduced the problem of the timescale because BGP hijacks, they're really of short duration. So maybe while we receive this message could be too late. On the other side, we want to scan in a proactive way all the /24 and understand if we're able to see something. So finally, today I showed you our software and our results of the census that were quite lightweight. Everything is open source, is on the website. You can plug your measurement or you can use directly RIPE Atlas. And all the results of the census, there is also a web interface that you can just insert an IPv4 or just a name and you can check if it's Anycast or not. And that's all for today.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jeff Osborne from ISC talking about making the root soak up more badness.
I've got 3 minutes until lunch. Somebody time me. Let's see if I can do this. This is really going to be quick. This is generally a lightning talk. I don't have slides. I have a few minutes of something I wanted to ask about, and I didn't pay Randy Bush a penny, and he totally set me up. We're trying to expand the F-root in ways that it gets out there and sucks up more of the badness. So I'm Jeff Osborne. I'm the president of IFC. We're known for developing bind and open source DHCP, but we also operate one of the 13 root servers, the F-root. Again, everybody else helped me out with this, setting this up. You already saw the F-root as deployed. There are 58 servers around the world now. And we've wondered why it wouldn't make more sense, given changes in technology and how cheap everything's getting, to go with hundreds or possibly in the low thousands. There are a total of about less than 600 root servers in the world, and the delays getting to them are something worth looking at, but Randy brings up the much more interesting point. This is Anycast. We can really stop a lot of bad attacks out where they are if we push the servers out to the edges. To get all Sesame Street on you, let me do a little 60-second bit. All internet traffic's routed to its destination by the routing infrastructure. Anycast routing lets there be more than one destination for this. So the attack traffic's going side by side unless there's a topologically closer node, and then that's basically absorbing the attack. This is a 10-minute thing. I'm trying to do it in 3 minutes because somebody's generally timing me. Anyway, the short answer is we're really looking to get tremendously more nodes out there, and it takes a little bit of routing magic. You can't just drop a root instance in your house without some magic going on. We're looking for partners who are interested, who are deployed internationally. We think it's of value for most ISPs or CCTLDs to have a root instance to sort of keep the trouble in their neighborhood rather than having time to assemble into a critical mass and harm things at the end of a longer attack vector. So I'm not sure whether we're going to use a bunch of cheap little platforms. We've thought about things like using 1,000 minnow boards. We've thought about using containers. There are different ways to do this. We're still in the wouldn't it be better to do a lot more phase, but this spring we're trying to find partners, people interested, and input from all of the smart folks in the room. Anybody time me? Did I beat 3 minutes? I hate standing between a crowd and lunch. Thank you very much for your time. If you're interested, we are, my one slide, is this going to work? Oh man, come on. f-root at isc.org, and we'd be interested in your input. Button. There it is at the bottom, f-root at isc.org. Thank you very much.
Time for one question, if anyone has a question. Okay. Oh, wait, Jared.
Hi, Jared Mach from NTT. So in the past, I'd had a number of conversations with Jim Martin, who I think runs FRoot for you guys, about asking him if there were things that we could do to help facilitate with FRoot. And so this seems to maybe be a direct follow-on to, maybe some of those inquiries I had to him in the past. So is he still the best person to be talking to, or is there somebody else who I should be talking to over there?
If you send it to f-root@isc.org, you're in a red shirt, so I'll have an easy time finding you when I climb down from here. We'll have
Yeah,
that
it
talk.
matches my hair. All right,
There you
thanks.
go. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jeff.